yourself a cold one.
They strike 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it's Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, and it's one of my favorite times of the year because we are transitioning to the 2024 college football season and the 2025 NFL Draft. By the way, most of you already know this, but for those new listeners or new people checking us out on the DraftKings Network, number one, we're presented by DraftKings. Thankfully, please use the code ROSS when you either play best ball on the DraftKings app, best ball fantasy football, or if you're placing any wagers. That's number one. Number two, absolutely have one of my favorite guys in sports media. Has been a long time since we were having a pregame meal at Franklin Field. I think it was pizza, like at least 10 years ago. The czar of the playbook, who you need to check out on social media at FBall Game Plan. He's got this terrific YouTube channel, which is kind of how I think he initially got so popular. He's all over CBS Sports HQ and all these other places now, calls games. Check him out at FBall Game Plan on Twitter, the great Emory Hunt. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL on social media. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. And of course, you can check this show out on YouTube if you want, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. So here's what we got. Over the next few weeks, we will go over the top prospects in, I guess they call it the Power Four now that the Pac-12 no longer exists. Starting, really, we'll just go alphabetical order. So we'll start today with the ACC. Then we'll do an episode on basically the other FBS schools, maybe even FCS as well, since Emory knows them so well. It's interesting, Emory, starting with the ACC today. Now, this is just one website, right? And so take it for what it's worth. But I was just doing some research, and they only have one prospect from the ACC currently listed as a top 25 player for the 2025 NFL Draft. We know that'll change over the course of the season, but that's Barrett Carter, the linebacker from Clemson. It's funny, you know, a lot of these guys, we'll see how much they're able to grow during the season. What jumped out to me, I guess, Emory, is how many quarterbacks in the ACC I recognize their names. And a lot of them are new. I mean, DJ's back in the conference. Grayson McCall, who I talked to for a while before the Army game last year against Coastal Carolina, he's now at NC State. A lot of recognizable quarterbacks in the ACC, Emory.
And a lot of good quarterbacks. I mean, we were talking about, you know, guys like, you know, Cam Ward or DJ Uiagalelei, and you talking about, you know, Grayson McCall coming in from Coastal Carolina, and now he's at NC State with a chance to prove himself. I mean, think about this. You have a bunch of guys that are coming into this conference new. Cam Ward, DJU is back. You mentioned Grayson McCall. How about Malik Murphy of Texas transferring to Duke? You know, how about Chandler Rogers transferring from North Texas to Cal? Like, these are some really good quarterbacks that are able to come in this conference and play. So I think what we'll see is the rising tide that raises all boats. This is, I want to say, hands down, probably some of the more consistent quarterback play we'll see. I'd argue if you look across other conferences, you'd be hard pressed to find guys like Haynes King and, you know, Tony Muskett, Ashton Daniels from Stanford that can come in there and really consistently play, like Preston Stone of SMU, like he's a really good quarterback. So this conference is going to be super competitive to watch all season long because we have the type of quarterback play. Kyle McCord is now at Syracuse. So you have a lot of stable quarterbacks, which should help out everyone else as a whole.
I would love, I really wish, and it's maybe just for my own edification, I really wish there was a way where we could see how much money each one of these guys is making via NIL. I mean, now that we know that that's a big part of the deal, and some of these quarterbacks are definitely better off staying in college and making the money they can make as a above average starting quarterback than trying to go pro. They definitely are. Like Sam Hartman last year, Notre Dame, that was a gold mine for him. That was absolutely fantastic. So I think that's one real benefit, I would say, Emory, of NIL and the transfer portal is we really should get pretty good quarterback play or more consistent quarterback play every year as these experienced guys stay in college, some of them as long as they can, because they're going to make more money there than they would in some of the secondary pro leagues or spring pro leagues, since it's so tough to make the NFL.
Especially when you think about the nature of the position. Any other position, you can get multiple guys out there on the field. But quarterback, you only can play one. So it makes sense to spread the wealth at the position from a talent perspective, where you can get guys that may have been, because if we go back to when we played, Ross, 3 of these guys would be on the same depth chart, right? So you'd be like, man, our third string guy really good, but he just won't get the opportunity because he's stuck behind 2 other guys that are really doggone good. Now you may have the good guy starting and a young high school player that you're developing before he becomes good and then he goes off to somewhere else. So yeah, now that you have the ability to pay these quarterbacks and spread the talent across different teams, it gets what we're going to get this year in the ACC.
As we get into the season, I think, just making this point for some of the new listeners or viewers, we will talk about the biggest games and the top prospects and some of Emory's sleepers or smaller school guys every week. And Emory makes his picks against the spread. So we're not that far away from that. College football starts August 24th with week 0. Here we are sitting on July 8th. Let's dive into it, Emory, with a guy I know you've been a big fan of for a while. I'm curious to get your thoughts about him, though, as a pro prospect. That's Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami.
I love his game, Ross, and I've been a big fan of his since Incarnate Word, since he took over that team. I think it was the pandemic season, and he just balled out. You know, I had him on my show back when I was doing a TV show when he was a freshman at UIW, lit up the scoreboard, just tremendous touchdown and check down type guy. And if I had to make a comparison to a pro quarterback, how about Vernon Adams for the BC Lions? Plays the same way. They have that whip-like arm. They drive the ball with good velocity. They do a great job of escaping the pocket. Yes, they can run and pick up yards with their feet, but they do a good job of buying time, keeping their eyes downfield, and then driving the football. Now, Cam is someone that, you know, you want to see him be a little bit more careful with the football. I feel like at times he does get a little bit reckless where he'll put the ball on the turf or he'll try to force a throw that he should just eat or just throw it away. And we hope that improves at Miami, because I think he has a chance to not only win the Heisman Trophy, get Miami to the postseason, win the ACC, but also has a chance to be a first-round pick. This is someone that plays the quarterback position how today's game is played, and I think he is being very underrated as a pro quarterback prospect.
Wow, strong. You know, speaking of strong, while we're on quarterbacks, I think we forget, you mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of new teams in the ACC. You know, for those of you that don't follow it as closely, here's the teams in the ACC. Boston College, Cal Golden Bears, Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, NC State, North Carolina, Pitt, the SMU Mustangs, Stanford Cardinal, Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. So the new ones, SMU, Stanford, and the Cal Golden Bears. And 2 of them have good quarterbacks. You mentioned them earlier. Let's go to Ashton Daniels from Stanford, Emory.
Listen, watching Daniels play, and you watch the Colorado game and other games that Stanford played in, you see, like, man, this dude, he actually is not bad. He could throw the heck out the football. He makes some good throws, like down the field, at the intermediate level of the field. He could throw into tight windows. the turnovers concern you. But man, if you can flatline that level of consistency within your game and not turn the ball over and protect the ball, the passing talents are there. I think he has a chance to make arguably the biggest jump in perception this year based off the glimpses we saw him, in a lot of different games. Obviously, when they played Colorado, they had the big comeback, and it was the one receiver that had 1,000 yards receiving in that ball game. So, but outside of that, you watched him, you're like, man, he's actually not bad. He's a really good, talented player, and he's going to be a junior this year, so he still has another year, and he still has room to grow. I expect him to take the biggest jump this season for the Cardinals.
What about Preston Stone, Emory, from SMU? Feels like he's been putting up numbers for a while.
Throws a tremendous touch, the timing, the anticipation. He's going to put up numbers this year. SMU, listen, Ross, we know what they did in the early 80s when they were cheating. Now it's legal to do what they did in the 80s. They about to go crazy. Like, SMU may be a perennial top 5 team. The one thing you don't argue about is Texas money. Like, Texas money is different than anything other type of money. Maybe Ivy League money is different, but Texas money? Oh no, Ross. SMU about to be a powerhouse. We saw them for a 3-year stretch in the early 80s do that. But they have the quarterback in Preston Stone who does a good job in pushing the deep ball. So if you have a receiver that can get a step on the guy, and people need to understand that the deep ball is a quick throw, he can get out there quickly with the anticipation, throws a catchable ball. I think another one that's being not talked about enough here as we enter the season.
I don't think people talk enough or know enough about the Game Time app. I am a huge fan of it. It's funny. My buddy just said to me, "Are you going to the Zach Bryan concert?" And I was like, I didn't even know about it. Immediately pulled it up on my Game Time app. $262 for either Tuesday, August 6th or Wednesday, August 7th. But with the Game Time app, I know I'm getting the best deal. That's the key for me. Plus, a lot of times I wait till last minute. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. I've told you guys this before. You'd be amazed how inexpensive you can get to some Major League Baseball games. Awesome family event. They have the lowest price guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying those MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code DRAFT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code DRAFT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Speaking of guarantees, I guarantee the most flavorful light beer you'll have is Labatt Blue Light. That's what I enjoy. Even in the summer, it's so tasty on the beach with friends, living life to the power of we. Always enjoy it responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. All right, 2 more quarterbacks I got to ask you about, Emory, including DJU. I think we talked about him a little bit last year when he was at Oregon State. Now he's back in the ACC at Florida State, which is interesting. Curious about your thoughts on him. He's a big kid. He runs pretty well. He has a huge arm, yet you don't hear about him as much as some of these other guys.
I think because we've seen him for 5 years now, right? The spark at Clemson, and then the inconsistent second season. Then he goes out to Oregon State, and you're kind of like, okay, he's kind of still the same he was at second year at Clemson, and now we're seeing him transfer to Florida State. It's like, all right, well, we'll just have to. You kind of don't have any new takes on DJU. Yes, and you laid it all out. Big, strong, powerful arm, but can he tie all those things together to play consistently? Now, however, he's going to a place and a coach in Norvell that does a great job at getting the most out of his quarterbacks. We saw the progression, the last quarterback made. And so we're going to see if DJU can take that step and kind of rekindle what we saw from him early in his freshman year at Clemson. Norvell is a great guy to tap into that, so we'll see how it goes.
What do you think about the guy that replaced DJ at Clemson, Cade Klubnik? It felt like he was a little bit disappointing last year from what people were expecting.
Especially in the bigger games. I felt like Clemson really was hoping he could take the next step and kind of lead them from the front like they've seen other quarterbacks do, like they saw Deshaun Watson, like they saw Taj Boyd, like they saw Trevor Lawrence do. And because he was such a highly touted recruit, he just didn't take that step. And they lean more on their run game, which is fantastic, by the way. I think they have a underrated back that, that's going to be really good this year. But they need Klubnik to really take that next step in these bigger games. And this year in the ACC, it's all big games because everyone has top-tier quarterback play, even down to Boston College with Thomas Castellanos, who's a fun player to watch. So if Klubnik can elevate and play better in the bigger games, I think that changes the perception of what people feel about his pro prospects moving forward.
What about some of these running backs, Emory? I know we talked about him last year, but Damien Martinez, who had been balling at Oregon State's now at Miami.
Got a good feel for the run game. So he understands blocking assignments, what the run game is trying to accomplish, and he's able to make subsequent moves off of that and runs with good power, breaks a lot of tackles, and is consistent. Rarely do you see him take a loss. And now you put him in Miami with another tailback in Mark Fletcher. Man, they have an excellent 1-2 punch along with a quarterback that can aid the run game because of his athleticism and Cam Ward. That's why I am super high on Miami coming into the season. But Martinez is a foundational back. He's a future starter, I believe, at the NFL level.
Wow. What about some of the other running backs in the league? Omarion Hampton from UNC.
I'm surprised no one's talking about him as RB1. I know, the running back from Boise State is making his rounds as everybody's RB1.
Yeah, Ashton Genty, yeah.
Yeah, everybody's talking about him. They didn't talk about him last year, but they now talk about him now as RB1, which I find fascinating. Everybody comes to the same conclusion on one player when, the tastemakers tweeted out. But Hampton is a baller. Like, he has explosiveness, he has burst, he has power, he runs behind his pads. He does a fantastic job catching the ball out the backfield. He's a big play guy. And so he's someone, to me, should be in the running. If you have him as your RB1, I have no complaints about that because he's definitely talented enough to be that.
Wow. And they had him with Drake May last year.
Right. And he was the one that really carried that offense. You saw him show up in the biggest of moments and the biggest of games, like consistently. He broke tackles, seamlessly and was able to show an easy acceleration to pull away from people on long runs, outrunning angles at times. Like, he's a fantastic back, man.
What about Jaydn Ott from Cal? It's still, by the way, so weird to talk about Cal in the Atlantic Coast Conference, the ACC, but let's do it anyway. Jaydn Ott from Cal.
I mean, it's almost like they should be in the Pacific Coast, right? But I digress. That's been beat to death about them playing in the ACC. But Jaydn Ott, don't he reminds you a little bit, and he kind of reminds me of this guy, Isaiah Davis from South Dakota State. Like, has a upright running style, but can pull away from defenders. He has good patience pre-line of scrimmage. He's able to hit the hole as it's opening up, and then we see him, just start to easily pull away from guys. That easy stride, good running back, good overall skill set. And the fun part about these conference realignments, that we get to see them against, different defenses. So we know you're going to get Florida State's defense. You're going to get, Clemson's defensive front. You're going to get Duke, who still has some remnants of that defense there as well. So we get to see them play against good defenses in the ACC. And I think Ott has a chance to really, another one that if you say, hey, he's my RB1, you wouldn't get any complaints from me as well.
What about, Emory, when you look at the tight end Oronde Gadsden II from Syracuse? Always makes me feel old when you see these guys that are saying, oh, the Oronde, that was a while ago, so that doesn't make me feel that bad. But Syracuse has a tight end. It's so funny, isn't it? How many of these former NFL guys, their sons end up playing tight end. I don't know why that is. Like Jason Taylor, Oronde Gadsden. Your thoughts on Oronde Gadsden II from Syracuse?
Yeah, it's not like he's Jameer Nelson Jr., which I found out. I was like, wow, man, Jameer. I remember he had St. Joe's. You know what I'm saying? And so Gadsden, to me, it's interesting because he started at receiver, then he moved to tight end. I think he's better suited at tight end anyway because of the speed thing. But he definitely understands how to run routes. He gets open versus zone. He finds a soft spot, and he has great hands. And when you think about the tight end position, you're thinking about, okay, it's a glorified, bigger wide receiver now type position. So he fits I know when I grade the film, he's going to be a flex tight end. And he consistently wins. And he's another one of these guys. I'm big on big moments and Syracuse hadn't had a lot of them. But when they do offensively, they tend to go to Gadsden. I know he's going to be coming off an injury, so he's going to have to show that he hadn't lost more speed. And I'll be interested to see how they do now with Cal McCord as the quarterback over there at Syracuse. And, can he, raise his stock because how he played with Marvin Harrison Jr., I think dropped his stock and kind of pushed him out of Ohio State. But here's another opportunity to feature another big-time threat in the passing game to where you can kind of raise his stock, but also raise yours in the process.
All right, so what about some of the top guys on defense, Emory? I said it earlier, one website, and I'll throw their name out there just because it was easy. It popped up. It's drafttech.com. I just typed in top 2025 ACC NFL draft prospects, and the top two guys they had are two of the top guys on your list on defense. Let's start with Barrett Carter, the linebacker from Clemson who played next to Trotter Jr. last year.
It's weird how you had folks say things about Trotter when I feel like him and Carter play the same way. I had, Trotter as my number one inside linebacker. Carter plays the same type game. It's just an easy movement to the football in the run game. You constantly see him just flow through trash. It's almost like it's him and the tailback. O-line be damned, D-line be damned, lead blocker be damned. He's finding the football, gets there easily, and is able to make a solid form tackle. So, to me, it wouldn't surprise me coming out of this whole cycle, he ends up as my number one inside linebacker as well, because I think they play the same game. And I'm just a big fan of guys that look to hit, and he's one of those players.
Wow, okay. And then a couple Florida State defenders jumped out to you. We'll start with the D lineman, Patrick Payton. They had a couple D linemen. Did the Rams get both those guys last year, Verse and Fisk? Maybe?
Yes,
I think they did.
They
I
did.
think the LA Rams got Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, which, by the way, I love. I mean, both those guys were lower-level guys. Then they go to Florida State and they blow up and become high picks. That's another positive of the portal.
Right, because you get guys that take the challenge on, start, dominate, and then end up elevating their stock. A guy like Payton, to me, he's 6'5", about 260, has a lot of different tools in his toolbox in terms of pass rushing. He could dip under the shoulder. He could long arm stab. He could, play with power and walks O-lineman back into the pocket. He could chase down the run going away. So he has a lot of those traits. I think he's going to be a phenomenal prospect moving forward. And Fentrell Cypress, the cornerback, plays a lot taller than he is. I think he's 6 feet, but he plays like he's 6'3" with how he's able to wall guys to the sideline. He reminds me a lot of Marlon Humphrey in how he plays press coverage because he's got long arms, he's patient, he's not panicky, and he knows, how to play the ball through the hands of the receiver and has a great sense of timing. He's a real tough matchup for anybody. He was like that at Virginia and just carries that over to Florida State.
Florida State also has Marvin Jones Jr., who will be coming off the edge since we're talking about, guys that are sons of former NFL guys. And that Stanford receiver you were talking about, I don't know how, it's Ayomanor, Elik Ayomanor, I think. I'm not sure how to say it. That's the guy that had 5,000 yards against Colorado last year. 6'2", 210. Love it. All right, so it looks like next week we'll move on to the Big 12, Emory, including Arizona State, Arizona, BYU. I mean, the Big 12, this is, yeah, I mean, you said earlier, it's been beat to death, but it is absolutely wild. Check him out on social media at FBall Game Plan. Check me out at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. Feels good to be talking about the top players in college football heading into the season. The keg is kicked. We're all tapped out.
Thanks for tuning in to College Draft. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and Fantasy Feast, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.